Hello and welcome. Warm and militant greetings to all the attendees of today's educational discussion on Jose Maria Sison's specific characteristics of our people's war. This event is part of the Ka Joma Lives study movement, highlighting Ka Joma's ideological contributions to the revolutionary struggles of the world proletariat and propagating the lessons of his teachings to carry our movement towards victory. This
Apakah bisa
webinar has been
mendengar
timed to
suaraku?
coincide with the 54th anniversary of the New People's Army. As Ka Joma said in the first chapter of Specific Characteristics of Our People's War, to paraphrase Chairman Mao, without an army like the New People's Army, the people have nothing. We salute the NPA and its ardent defense of and service to the people and of the Philippines in our collective struggle for liberation. As the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the Philippines stated in their anniversary message, the preservation and nationwide growth of the NPA through more than 5 decades of fighting clearly proves the correctness of the strategy and tactics set forth by the party for waging protracted people's war in the Philippines. Mabuhay ang NPA. Long live the New People's Army. Long live the People's War. While we won't have time during this webinar to have a Q&A, we do invite you to add your questions in the Q&A box or to send them to jmsbooklaunch@gmail.com. To start our program, we are extremely honored to have Julieta Cajuli de Lima as our opening speaker. Cajuli is a revolutionary writer, editor, and librarian who has committed her life to the liberation of the Filipino people alongside her comrade in arms and in love, the late Ka Joma. Let's now hear from Cajuli.
Joma wrote specific characteristics of our people's war early in 1973 in a UG house in the mountain provinces. We first conducted the research on the geography and history of the Philippines and of course read and analyzed the report sent in by the regional party committees since the re-establishment of the party in December 1968. So by the time the article was written, the party and its revolutionary forces had already been in existence for 5 years, with regional committees established all over the country. By then, Philippine Society and Revolution had already been published in several editions, from the first mimeograph edition by the Central Publishing House, serialized in the Philippine Collegian of the University of the Philippines, subsequently domestically by a Manila-based printing press, and then by Takung Pao Press in Hong Kong for international distribution. So were the Guide for Establishing the People's Democratic Government and the Revolutionary Guide to Land Reform, issued in September 1972. IPO consolidation of the party had been proceeding well, with the party membership greatly expanded, with the primary course fulfilled on a wide scale and the intermediate course up for fulfillment. The advanced course was being undertaken by the party central committee among party cadres through the Revolutionary School of Mao Zedong thought. The AD courses were synchronized with organizational plan. As for the party membership, the following is a quote from the chairman's political report to the CC Plenum based on the last count. At the beginning of this year, about 55% of our membership are in the countryside and about 45% are in the Manila-Rizal region and other urban areas all over the archipelago. About 53% of the party membership are of peasant origin, about 4% of worker origin, about 43% are of petty bourgeois origin. Only recently, there has been some considerable increase in the membership of peasant origin. What may be considered the most serious error incurred within the party during the last 3 years is sectarianism, which greatly hampered the organizational building of the party. The persistence of small group mentality complicated the methods of increasing party membership with the failure to recruit several hundreds of mass activists in the party. The party and the New People's Army have already established 735 barrio organizing committees and 60 barrio revolutionary committees. These people's committees govern a total population of about 400,000 and are found in a total of 18 provinces, 7 in northern Luzon, 5 in central Luzon, 4 in southern Luzon, and 2 in western Visayas. We have been able to reach so many provinces by 2 methods of expansion. One, by advancing wave upon wave and using border areas of several provinces, and 2, by leaping over white areas and sending single cadres or teams to separate strategic points. Northern Luzon has 515 barrio organizing committees and 50 revolutionary committees. and Central Luzon 150 and 10 respectively. Southern Luzon 60 barrio organizing committees, and Western Visayas 10. After 3 years, we now have in the New People's Army the strength of 72 regular squads or 800 regulars armed with modern weapons. These should be equivalent to 8 full regular companies, but we are still in the general process of bringing squads into regular platoon formations. There are now 10 regular platoons. Apart from these platoons, we have 1 regular company and we are in the process of building another one. It is only a matter of short period that we shall be able to adequately put up commands at the company level. The armed strength of the People's Army includes not only its regular fighters, but also about 1,500 local guerrilla fighters armed mainly with old single-action rifles and homemade rifles of the shotgun type, and about 16,000 militia members. Building the Revolutionary United Front, a People's Revolutionary Government, set up special organs, the Preparatory Commission of the National Democratic Front to help the Central Committee in winning over allies in the cities, and to prepare the way for the National Democratic Front as an intermediate step toward the People's Democratic Republic. Apart from the introduction, specific characteristics of our People's War has 7 parts as follows: the National Democratic Revolution of a new type, 2. Protracted war in the countryside, 3. Fighting a small mountainous archipelago, 4. From small to weak to big and strong, 5. A fascist puppet dictatorship amidst crisis, 6. Under one imperialist power, and 7. Decline of U.S. imperialism and advance of the world revolution. I quote from the introduction. From the great treasury of Marxism-Leninism, we draw basic principles and historical lessons to shed light on the people's war that we are waging. But these are of general value. They are a general guide to our action. To rest content with them without integrating them without concrete practice is to turn them into lifeless dogma. To dispense with them is to engage in blind action. As in all matters, we must integrate theory and practice in the conduct of people's war. The universal theory of Marxism-Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, must be applied to the concrete conditions of the Philippine Revolution. We adhere firmly to the great Lenin's teaching. The soul of Marxism is the concrete analysis of concrete conditions. Only by understanding the specific characteristics of our own people's war can we understand the laws that govern it, and thus can we adopt and implement the correct strategy and tactics for carrying it forward to victory. The basic principles and historical lessons already found in the universal theory of the revolutionary proletariat have been paid for in blood by various peoples triumphant in their respective revolution. But as far as carrying out and winning our own people's war is concerned, there is nothing more important than those principles and lessons that we learn on the basis of Philippine conditions and our own revolutionary experience. In this regard, we put the highest premium on those principles and lessons paid for in blood by our own people. Integrating Marxist-Leninist theory with Philippine practice is a two-way process. 1. The National Democratic Revolution of a new type details the character and requirements of the Philippine Revolution, our country being semi-colonial and semi-feudal, under the indirect rule of U.S. imperialism, whose most reliable agents and puppets are the big comprador landlords and big bureaucrats. The overwhelming majority of our 41 million people, more than 90% of them, are severely exploited and oppressed by the big compradors and big landlords, who together with their closest and best paid political and technical subalterns compose a tiny minority that is no more than 2% of the population. The most oppressed and exploited are the toiling masses of workers and peasants. The urban petty bourgeoisie and the middle or national bourgeoisie also suffer from the semi-colonial and semi-feudal situation, with the former stratum suffering more than the latter. Our National Democratic Revolution is a continuation of the old type, which was led by a nascent bourgeoisie but differs from it in the sense that it is of the new type led by the proletariat. It is part of the proletarian socialist revolution, which has emerged since the first global inter-imperialist war and the victory of the great socialist October Revolution. Though we are still fighting for a national democratic revolution, this constitutes a preparation for carrying out a socialist revolution in our country. The party wields two weapons against the enemy. These are armed struggle and the National United Front. These are interrelated like the spear and the shield. One serves the other. The National Democratic Front ensures the widest possible popular support for armed struggle. It splits the enemy ranks and isolates the worst single enemy at a time. Armed struggle is specifically the weapon for carrying out the central task of the revolution, which is the destruction and overthrow of the enemy rule and the seizure of political power. The primacy of armed struggle over parliamentary struggle is asserted. Between armed struggle and parliamentary struggle, the former is principal, and the latter is secondary. Every genuine revolutionary knows that the chief component of the reactionary state is the reactionary army. The Filipino people are helpless without their own army. They cannot take a single step towards smashing the entire military bureaucratic machinery of the enemy without the people's army. The basic alliance of the proletariat and the peasantry is the foundation of the National United Front. The stronger this alliance is in the course of people's war, the stronger is the desire of the urban petty bourgeoisie to join the National United Front and take active part in revolutionary work. Second part, protracted war in the countryside. 85% of the national population is in the countryside. Of this rural population, the poor peasants together with the farm workers comprise about 75%, the middle peasants about 15%, the rich peasants about 5%. The landlords may be only 1 or 2%. About 3 or 4% is taken up by non-agricultural wage earners, artisans, small peddlers, merchants, students, teachers, and other professionals. There are drastic deviations from these percentages only in particular places where there are mines, logging, modern plantations, and some industries. Fishermen along the sea coasts are mainly peasants. On the basis of these facts, the peasant population and the countryside have a special significance to us in waging people's war. The main social problem, the single problem affecting the greatest number of people, lies in the countryside. It is the land problem. Feudalism and semi-feudalism oppress and exploit the poor peasants, the farm workers, and the lower middle peasants. Without focusing attention on this problem and providing it with a solution, we cannot draw into the ranks of the revolution the most formidable force that can overwhelm the enemy. Agrarian revolution is the solution. The peasant masses are aroused and mobilized to overthrow landlord authority and carry out land reforms step by step. Only by carrying out agrarian revolution can the revolutionary leadership activate the peasant masses as the main force of the revolution and realize the basic alliance of the proletariat and the peasantry. From the ranks of the downtrodden peasantry can then be drawn the greatest number of armed contingents. As it now stands, the New People's Army is composed mainly of peasant recruits. The growth of our People's Army depends on the support of the peasant masses. Our experiences in more than 5 years shows that we have created a total of 20 guerrilla fronts in 7 regions outside Manila Rizal. These fronts continue to thrive in the countryside even in the face of the unprecedentedly harsh fascist countermeasures. Then follows the discussion on how revolutionary civil war is conducted in advanced capitalist countries, preceded by long periods of parliamentary struggle. Back to the Philippines. In the Philippines, it is as necessary as it is possible to wage a protracted people's war. It is only through a long period of time that we can develop our forces step by step by defeating the enemy forces piece by piece. We are in no position to put our small and weak forces into strategically decisive engagement with militarily superior enemy forces. In carrying out the protracted people's war, we applied the strategic line of encircling the cities from the countryside. We steadfastly developed guerrilla bases and zones at various strategic points of the country. In a subsequent stage, these areas shall be linked by regular mobile forces which shall be in a position to defend larger and more stable revolutionary bases in the countryside. From such stable revolutionary bases, we shall be able ultimately to seize the cities and advance to nationwide victory. While it is our principal task to wage a protracted people's war in the countryside, it is our secondary task to develop revolutionary underground and broad anti-imperialist and democratic mass movement in the cities. We should combine the revolutionary struggles in the cities and countryside, in the towns and barrios, in red areas, white areas, and pink areas. We should excel in combining legal, illegal, and semi-legal activities through a widespread and stable underground. The third section, fighting in a small mountainous archipelago. The Philippines is a small mountainous archipelago. It is made up of some 7,100 islands and islets with a total land area of 299,404 square kilometers or 115,600 square miles. The 11 largest islands compose 94% of the total land area and also contain 94% of the total population of the country. Every one of these and many other islands have a mountainous terrain with fertile soil. The importance of an island is not determined solely by its size. Population, forest area, and mountainous terrain are more important consideration for our people's war, especially at the initial stage. There are three outstanding characteristics of the Philippines in being an archipelago. First, our countryside is shredded into so many islands. Second, our two biggest islands, Luzon and Mindanao, are separated by such a cluster of islands as the Visayas. Third, our small country is separated by seas from other countries. From such characteristics arise a problem that are very peculiar to our people's war. On the one hand, it is true that our countryside is wide in relation to the cities. On the other hand, it is also true that we have to fight within narrow fronts because the entire country is small and its countryside is shredded. The war between us and the enemy easily assumes the characteristics of the intensive, ruthless, and exceedingly fluid. Waging a people's war in an archipelagic country like ours is definitely an exceedingly difficult and complex problem for us. At this stage that we are still trying to develop guerrilla warfare on a nationwide scale, the central leadership has had to shift from one organizational arrangement to another so as to give ample attention to regional party and army organizations. There is only one manifestation of the problem. Armed propaganda teams and initial guerrilla units scattered in far-flung areas are susceptible to being crushed by the enemy. This is another manifestation of the problem. There is no doubt that fighting in an archipelagic country like ours is initially a big disadvantage for us. Since the central leadership has to position itself in some remote area in Luzon, there's no alternative now, or even for a long time to come, but to adopt and carry out the policy of centralized leadership and decentralized operations. We must distribute and develop throughout the country cadres who are of sufficiently high quality to find their own bearing and maintain initiative not only within a period as short as 1 or 2 months, periods of regular reporting, but also within periods as long as 2 or more years in case the enemy chooses to concentrate on an island or a particular fighting front and blockade it. In the long run, the fact that our country is archipelagic will turn out to be a great advantage to us and a great disadvantage to the enemy. The enemy shall be forced to divide his attention and forces not only to the countryside, but also to so many islands. Our great advantage will show when we shall have succeeded in developing guerrilla warfare on a nationwide scale, and when at least we shall have been on the threshold of waging regular mobile warfare in Luzon or in both Luzon and Mindanao. We take advantage of a few major islands first and then other islands later. This is now well understood in the Visayas. In every island or in the specific part of an island that we choose to concentrate on, we must develop self-reliance, maintain our guerrilla units within a radius that is limited at a given time to avoid dissipation of our efforts, but wide enough for maneuver and advance wave upon wave, always expanding on the basis of consolidation. Among several guerrilla squads, it is necessary to have some center of gravity or rallying point, either for temporary retreat or for a concentrated operation against the enemy. At the same time, we should never lose sight of the necessity of fluidity, which often requires the shiftiness of such a center. Its regional party organization should see to it that at the present stage it develops only 1, 2, or 3 armed fronts. The Regional Executive Committee of the party should be based in the main front. More guerrilla bases and zones should arise only upon the consolidation of the few that could be sufficiently handled at one time. At present, it is not necessary to have an armed force in every province within a region. More often, it is advisable for us to locate our armed force at an inter-provincial border area for maximum effect because, in the first place, we do not have enough armed strength for every province. The principle of self-reliance needs to be emphasized among all revolutionary forces on a nationwide scale. This is because our small country is cut off by seas from neighboring countries, particularly those friendly to our revolutionary cause. The Vietnamese, Cambodian, and Laotian peoples are more fortunate than us in one sense because they share land borders with China, which serves as their powerful rear. Self-reliance can never be overemphasized among us. The mountainous character of the country countervails its archipelagic character from the very start. A mountainous terrain with some population, with thick vegetation, is an excellent condition for our people's war. If, on one hand, the archipelagic character of the country has a narrowing effect on our fighting fronts, its mountainous character has both a broadening and deepening effect. Mountains are usually the natural borders of provinces. Thus, we can maintain influence in several provinces even if we were to operate from only one mountainous border area. Also, the enemy cannot easily approach us because of the rough terrain, and we have more opportunity than anywhere else to conduct political work among the people. Before he starts to climb a hill, we can receive the relayed reports from the masses in the towns and in the barrios. We can actually see his coming from vantage points, and we can size up his operation in its possible times span by the sight of his troops, trucks, and planes. We can therefore prepare for his coming. The Sierra Madre sews up almost the entire region of Luzon on the eastern side of the Cagayan Valley to the Bicol region through central Luzon. It links as many as 9 provinces. At central points, it links 2 or 3 provinces at the same time. The Cordillera and Ilocos Mountains cover the middle and western parts of northern Luzon. These link as many as 11 provinces. At certain points, they link as many as 4 provinces at the same time. Mindanao is an even more mountainous and more forested island than Luzon. At the center of Mindanao are the mountainous provinces of Bukidnon and Cotabato. These are well populated as the mountain provinces of northern Luzon. These are linked up with almost all of the Mindanao provinces. Outside of Luzon and Mindanao, the mountainous of Panay links 4 provinces, and those of Samar, Leyte, and Mindoro link 2 provinces at the same time. A mountainous terrain where more people inhabit the foothills, clearings, plateaus, and riversides or creeksides is more favorable for the People's Army. The usual inhabitants of these mountainous areas are national minorities and poor settlers. These are very receptive to revolutionary propaganda. Their common enemy is the reactionary government, which treats their land as public lands and either directly grabs these from them or allows big landlords, big bureaucrats, or big capitalists to grab this from them. The fact that we have given the highest priority to creating guerrilla bases and zones in mountainous areas has helped us in a big way to preserve our guerrilla forces in the face of so many small and big campaigns of encirclement and suppression launched against us. Without the use of the Sierra Madre, our small forces in Cagayan Valley with only 3 companies as main force could not have preserved themselves against 7,000 enemy troops. Without the use of the mountainous areas of Sorsogon, our small initial forces there could not have expanded to their peak of 1 platoon-sized main force and 8 squads, and could have been more easily reduced upon the coming of 1,000 enemy troops. Our point is to use the combination of less populated mountainous terrain and the better populated plains, relying mainly on the former for military purposes at this early stage of our people's war. From the mountainous and hilly areas, we can expand towards the more populated plains. Even when we shall have gone into far-in building bases on the plains, our mountainous and hilly bases will retain their strategic importance as guarantors of the victorious advance of people's war. The central revolutionary base can best stand on the well-inhabited mountainous terrain that is of the greatest breadth in Luzon. Everywhere, bases on the plains, sea coasts, lakes, and rivers will find the indispensable support of bases in the mountainous and hilly areas. amidst the 20 guerrilla bases and zones already in existence, and on the basis of the experience gained in creating them, the central leadership can proceed to establish the Central Revolutionary Base somewhere in the well-inhabited mountainous areas of northern Luzon. The guerrilla bases and zones of northwest Luzon, northeast Luzon, and central Luzon can stand as the future terminals of regular mobile forces that are to arise at the Central Revolutionary Base. After doing well in building 2 or 3 guerrilla bases in every region outside Manila Rizal, we can go on to create more guerrilla bases and zones of every type. Every regional organization of the party and the People's Army is to establish its own central base and raise in the long run regular mobile forces. On the eve of the nationwide seizure of power, Manila Rizal shall be caught in a pincer between regular mobile forces from the north and from the 2 regions of southern Luzon. Because the country is archipelagic, it is a matter of necessity for us to develop guerrilla bases and zones along the seacoast. Communications is one clear immediate reason. We should be able to develop as many routes as possible between Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao by conducting political work among the fishermen and seamen. This would constitute a good support for our guerrilla warfare on land. The 4th section, from small and weak to big and strong. We must recognize the balance of forces between us and the enemy. This is the first requirement in waging either an entire war or a campaign or a single battle. As matters now stand, we are small and weak while the enemy is big and strong. There is no doubt that he is extremely superior to us militarily in such specific terms as number of troops, formations, equipment, technique, training, foreign assistance, and supplies in general. It will take a protracted period of time for us to change this balance of forces in our favor. Thus, protractedness is a basic characteristic of our people's war. The strength of our full-fledged guerrilla forces is a far cry from the regular military strength of the enemy. The typical center of gravity for our guerrilla forces is of mere platoon size. Around it gravitate armed propaganda squads and full-fledged guerrilla squads. So far, it is in northern Luzon, where we have reached the company level of formation with some sufficient strength and perform company-size operations. Now, even here, the level of armed activity is reduced to that of platoons and squads. However, the reduction of strength here, as a result of relentless enemy campaigns, is more than compensated by the growth of the new People's Army on a nationwide scale. Of course, if we were to include part-time guerrilla and militia units, we would be able to cite a higher figure for our military strength. But then, these, as a body of armed men, are small and weak in comparison to the enemy's own irregulars, the civilian home defense forces, which are far better armed. We cannot properly evaluate our accomplishments in the military field without giving due consideration to certain objective conditions. The subjective forces of the revolution, especially the party and the People's Army, started from scratch. The party has rebuilt from a scratch on December 26, 1968. Moreover, it had to face attacks not only of the bare-faced enemy, but also the vicious, revisionist remnants of the old merger party. The new People's Army was also built from a scratch on March 29, 1969. Moreover, it had to face not only the reactionary armed forces, but also the revisionist and the Tarok Sumulong gang. At the moment, the only way to amplify our armed strength and fighting effectiveness is to give full play to the popular support that we enjoy. The bolos, spears, crossbows, traps, and other indigenous weapons which the masses can easily avail themselves of have to be combined with homemade explosives and the few rifles in our hands. By seriously implementing the policy of luring the enemy and advancing in waves on a favorable terrain, both strategically and tactically, we can most effectively put to use the combination of rifles and indigenous weapons, and we can at certain times use only the latter if these are the only ones available. Depending on the circumstances, we have to dispose our limited forces in accordance with definite tasks, in a correct direction and within a definite radius. Our action takes the form of either concentration, shifting, or dispersion. We concentrate to attack the enemy mainly in the form of ambushes and raids on small enemy units that we can wipe out. We disperse to conduct propaganda and organizational work or to disappear before the enemy. We shift to circle or retreat to gain time and seek favorable circumstances for attack. Our guerrilla warfare is characterized by flexibility or timely shifting from one mode of action to another, and by fluidity or frequent shifting of ground. We must grasp and give full play to this characteristic to maintain the initiative against the enemy. Our experience has shown that our superiority over the enemy lies in our fighting a just war, a war for the people's democratic interest. We could not have lasted for so long with so small and weak an armed force were it not for the correct ideological and political line that the CPP has carried since its re-establishment. The NPA fights for the people's democratic interest with self-abnegating and highly conscious iron discipline and with wise and well-informed courage. Our Red commanders and fighters fight without fear of sacrifice and death because they are fighting in the broad interest of the people and not in the narrow interest of the imperialists or any individual or clique among the reactionaries. At the level of strategy, our Red commanders and fighters hate and are contemptuous of the enemy, but at the tactical level, they take serious and meticulous consideration of him so as to defeat every plot and maneuver that he is capable of. The fifth section, a fascist puppet dictatorship amidst crisis. The setting up of the fascist dictatorial regime of the U.S. Marcos clique is the clearest manifestation that the ruling political system is racked by a crisis that it can no longer deal with in the old way. The fascist puppet dictatorship is a counter-revolutionary measure of weakness and desperation rather than of strength. A whole series of terrorist acts, capped by the Second Plaza Miranda massacre, was unleashed by the Marcos ruling clique to pave the way for it. These events and subsequent imposition of a fascist martial rule and of a conspicuously automatic rule have incurred the profoundest hatred of the people and have intensified their desire for revolutionary change and for national freedom and democracy. The mastermind behind the fascist dictatorship is U.S. imperialism. The fascist dictatorship has been set up to make sure that under a new constitution, the privileges and interests of U.S. imperialism under the 1935 Constitution, the Parity Amendment, and the Laurel-Langley Agreement are not only preserved but even enlarged in the face of growing anti-imperialist struggle of the broad masses of the people, and furthermore to harden the Philippines as a base of U.S. imperialism in the western rim of the Pacific and in Asia, and in the face of the failed U.S. war of aggression in Indochina. All the fascist acts of the U.S. Marcos clique, carried out with brute and armed force, are calculated to stabilize the rule of issue imperialism and the local reactionary classes over the broad masses of the people. There are no significant armed forces opposing the fascist dictatorial regime except the New People's Army and the Bangsamoro Army. In Luzon, Visayas, and the greater part of Mindanao, there is no significant armed resistance except that waged by the New People's Army. We might say that in these areas we are faced with a unified fascist reaction. There is no open war among the reactionaries here. Because there is no open war among the reactionaries where it is, the New People's Army is faced with a unified fascist reaction. This means to say that the enemy can launch stronger offensives against us than otherwise in any particular area which he chooses to concentrate on. This is certainly a disadvantage for us. In this regard, we have no alternative but to study and apply the correct strategy and tactics of dealing with enemy campaigns. However, experience has shown that no matter how far the armed resistance in southwestern Mindanao is, it has induced the enemy to drastically reduce his forces in Cagayan Valley since March 1973. While it is true that we are faced with a unified fascist reaction in Luzon, Visayas, and the greater part of Mindanao, this is but the surface of a situation in which the broad masses of the people are seething with hatred for the enemy and are enthusiastically supporting the early beginning of our people's war. Beneath the apparent strength of the enemy is the deep-going crisis about an irremediable rottenness. If not for the broad support that they enjoy, that our small armed units would not be able to last long against the powerful assaults of the enemy. Sixth section, under one imperialist power. The single most valid explanation why there is yet no open war among the reactionaries despite all the bitterness of the internal contradictions among them a contradiction so far marked by the unilateral act of terrorism and violence by the Marcos fascist gang, is that the entire country is under the domination of one imperialist power. The country is therefore so much different from the China that was divided among several wrangling warlords supported by several contradictory imperialist powers. U.S. imperialism is the single most important determinant force in the reactionary politics in the country. The fascist dictator Marcos is aware that the length of his political life, including his personal safety, depends on U.S. imperialism. Thus, he does everything to satisfy his imperialist master. U.S. investments in Asia are most concentrated in the Philippines and continue to expand in the Philippines. According to conservative 1972 estimates, which do not fully take into account the current market value of all U.S. assets in the country, U.S. direct investments alone amount to $3 billion. These comprising 80% of foreign investments in the country are strategically located and enjoy a high rate of profit. Under these circumstances, we are certain that U.S. imperialism is even more sensitive to the development of our People's War in the Philippines than it has ever been in the People's War in Vietnam or elsewhere in Asia. The stakes are bigger in the Philippines. So we can expect that U.S. imperialism, despite its own pious words about withdrawing from Asia, will commit its own aggressive troops against the Filipino people in the event that the local reactionary armed forces would no longer suffice. Since the resumption of our People's War, U.S. military and police advisors on counterinsurgency have been increasing and participating in training and military operations against the people. The sale and free grant of military material to the local reactionary armed forces have been stepped up. U.S. aircraft flown by U.S. pilots have been involved in reconnaissance and bombing operations against us. U.S. Green Beret reconnaissance teams have been deployed under the cover of civic action in various parts of the countryside. AID, Peace Corps, and other ostensibly U.S. civilian personnel have been used for intelligence purposes by the U.S. country team composed of the U.S. ambassador, the CIA station chief, JUSMAG chief, AID director, and the USIA head. In the face of U.S. imperialism, we are in dire need of international support. The support of those abroad who are in sympathy with our just revolutionary cause is indispensable to our victory. Though we stand firmly for self-reliance, we do not mean to say that this stands for reducing foreign support and assistance to zero. As a matter of fact, as the revolutionary armed struggle progresses, the volume of foreign assistance may increase, though it may decrease in proportion to our total war effort. It has been demonstrated in the Vietnam War that as the level of armed struggle rose, the volume of international assistance grew. This is because U.S. imperialism heavily supported its puppets and unleashed the largest, longest war of aggression after World War II. The seventh section is the last, decline of U.S. imperialism and advance of the world revolution. The Philippine Revolution, particularly our People's War, is greatly advantaged today by the decline of U.S. imperialism in Asia and throughout the world, and corollarily by the advance of the world revolution. The main trend of revolution keeps on advancing because of the ever-worsening crisis of U.S. imperialism and the entire capitalist system. The world capitalist system continued to undergo a general crisis even as the first inter-imperialist war had just ended. Subsequently, fascist regimes emerged in a number of Western European countries and in Japan. The struggle for the redivision of the world among the imperialist powers further intensified. Inevitably, World War II broke out, as it did in connection with the first inter-imperialist war. The United States made profits on loans and war production before and throughout the war and provided supplies to both warring sides until it was ready to join the war on the winning side and pick up the spoils. The United States emerged from the war as number one imperialist power. The gains made by the revolutionary forces in the course of the war, when the U.S. forces temporarily retreated from the country, were squandered and lost. Recovering the Philippines, U.S. imperialism proceeded to expand in Asia and oppose every anti-imperialist struggle in the region. Soon after China's liberation, U.S. imperialism launched a war of aggression against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and failed to accomplish its objective of conquering the whole of Korea. Then it formed the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization and violated the Geneva Agreements on Indochina. Failing to learn its lesson from the Korean War, it once more launched a war of aggression in Vietnam and tried to defeat the people of South Vietnam, ruin the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, and subjugate the whole Indochina. At the height of the Vietnam War, 700,000 U.S. aggressor troops and 1.5 billion puppet troops were used against the People's Armed Forces. About $150 billion were spent by the U.S. imperialists to carry out their war, but they were forced to withdraw in defeat. The Vietnam War accelerated the decline of U.S. imperialism not only in Asia but also throughout the world. This portion that follows deals mainly with the contention between the two superpowers, US and Soviet Union, which no longer exists today. Now the main imperialist contradiction is between a rising China and a declining United States. And the current concern is whether these contending powers would avoid a Thucydides trap. And for the revolutionary forces in the Philippines and the world over, the issue is how to take advantage of this contradiction in advancing the revolutionary cause. The Philippine Revolution, particularly the People's War that we are presently waging, finds abundant support not only among the broad masses of the people in the Philippines. It also finds abundant support in the peoples and proletariat of the socialist countries, colonies and semi-colonies, and capitalist countries. Support comes in general form of fighting in common against one or two superpowers, and in cases to increase in the future, also in the form of direct and concrete assistance to the Philippine Revolution. It's the end of the specific. So long as the oppression and exploitation of the Filipino people by U.S. imperialism and local exploiting classes persist, the Communist Party of the Philippines has fertile ground for leading and waging the People's Democratic Revolution. As the oppression and exploitation escalates under the U.S. Marcos regime, the CPP and the Filipino proletariat and people can win ever greater victories in the revolutionary struggle and realize a new Philippines that is truly independent, democratic, prosperous, socially just, and progressive in an all-around way.
Salamat Ka Julie for that speech and for taking us through the context behind the writing of specific characteristics of our people's war. What an excellent summary of the 7 sections of the text. I'm sure for anyone here today who has not read it, you will now have a good sense of the overall text, but you should also read the full piece, which we will include a link to in the chat box. You can also find it on the link tree of People's Events through the link if you're joining us on the line. And if you are here in person, you can also scan our QR code. Up next, we will have our first reactor of the day, who is Cielo Rojas, who will share her knowledge and experiences of the People's War in Mindanao and how the main points, as presented by Ka Joma, provide practical guidance for the advance of the revolution on the island.
Thank you very much, Leah. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat at magandang hapon sa mga kasama from all over the world who are joining us on this ED discussion on Ka Joma's specific characteristics of our People's War. As we celebrate today the 54th anniversary of the founding of the New People's Army, it is only fitting for us to revisit the text of the specific characteristics of our People's War, which describes the physical as well as the social terrain of the Philippines that makes it fertile ground for the sowing the seeds of revolution and lead through the party to the proletarian party, how it can lead the revolution to victory. When we review our Marxism-Leninism and Maoism, Lenin has always told us that the principal task of every party cadre is to study and be expert in adopting the principles of Marxism-Leninism to the concrete conditions of our people's war to lead it and bring the revolution to victory. Ka Joma's essay provides us with a set of general guidelines that is the basis of our ideological, political, and organizational work so that we can apply correct strategies and tactics based on our concrete analysis of our concrete situation. Among kasamas, among comrades, we have always been exhorted to apply concrete analysis to concrete situations because this is a very important tool so that we can lead the revolution, the people's war towards victory. We call lessons from revolutionary experiences of other countries that brought them to victory, but moreover, we learn lessons from our own revolutionary history and our own experience. Mindanao has seriously heeded the call to complete the requisites of the advanced strategic defensive so that we can advance to the stage of strategic stalemate. However, uneven development of the People's War in the whole archipelago makes it important to consider assisting other strategically placed regions within and outside of Mindanao to reach a critical level of strength to achieve overall advancement. I will focus my sharing in my discussion mainly on the four major characteristics described in the essay and how these characteristics guide party cadres in correctly leading the revolution. Um, the 4 points in which I will concentrate my discussion and sharing on are: first, why is our People's War national democratic revolution of a new type? Second, why is it a protracted People's War that is fought mainly in the countryside? Third, um, why do we fight in the countrysides, and how do we take advantage of the mountainous archipelago that is the Philippines in our People's War? And fourth, how do we advance from being small to weak to being big and strong? First, when we consider the history of the revolutionary movement in Mindanao, it has started after the deployment of party units to Mindanao in 1971, a few years after the party has been re-established in 1968. From a very small unit with only 3 squads, it has grown to what it is today. It has covered almost all the provinces of Mindanao, with only a few smattering of provinces in which our presence has not been um, felt yet, especially as Mindanao has a specificity or as a particularity wherein there is a grouping of provinces in which liberation movements of the Muslims and the Moros are active. And with the um, peace accord between the reactionary government and the MILF, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, there is now um, areas in these parts that are still controlled by the MALF, but there are small patches or remains of the liberation movement of the Muslims that are still active in some of these areas, in which our uh, People's Army have cooperative and coordinative relationships with. So these are particularities in Mindanao which has helped um, um, advance the People's War in an overall um, sense. No? So why is our People's War of the National Democratic Revolution of a new type? First of all, it takes on the interest of the proletarian masses. Uh, Joma has pointed us towards a direction and towards the analysis that the Philippines is still a semi-colonial and semi-feudal country in which majority of the Filipino people are of peasant class origin. When you look at Mindanao in all its regions, although there are big cities that um, the Borghese government would like to think and would like to project are highly urbanized cities, still the population, even in these cities, are still largely of peasant origin. When you look at the major cities like Davao City, Zamboanga City, Cagayan de Oro City, and all the other smaller cities like Butuan City and General Santos City. These are cities, however, the general population is still of peasant origin, so that even when you do organizing in the urban areas, um, there are still a big part of the population that are peasants. More so when you go to the countrysides. In the countrysides, um, there the percentages that Joma has presented in his article, like 70% of the general population is still peasant, and it still exists until today. So that um, when he points us towards the direction of uh, agrarian revolution as the main content of our national democratic, of our political work among um, the exploited and oppressed people, we are actually um, uh, holding, or we are actually pursuing the primary interest of a wide majority of the masses, so that they are encouraged, or they are drawn into the ranks of the revolution. And because the peasant masses is still the source of all our fighting forces for the Red Army, it is important that we are able to draw them into the revolution, so that we will have the main weapon of the oppressed masses against the reactionary government and against the um, class enemies of the proletariat, which is the New People's Army. So um, it is important that in the leadership of the party, we build the basic alliance between the broad peasant masses and the most advanced um, class, with the most advanced class leadership of the workers. And in Mindanao, there is also about 20% of the population that is of the proletarian class, or of the workers' class, so that the direction is towards building a a strong basic alliance between the proletarian classes and the peasant classes, so that there is the basic alliance of workers and peasants that is the most reliable, that is the basis, or the subjective forces of the revolution. Um, when this alliance is strong, and when this alliance is concretely expressed through a strong people's army, it is very easy for the urban and the rural petty bourgeois to be drawn into the revolution themselves. In Mindanao, even if you are in the cities, the revolution seems to be very near, because it is part of the everyday conversation of even the cities, and even um, in big barrios. This is because the interface between the revolution in the mountains and the cities are actually very close. Whatever news of revolutionary successes and victories there are that comes from the mountains, it always reaches the big cities, and um, and um, it draws the urban petty bourgeois towards the revolution, and favors us in a sense that it readies them towards the advance of the revolution towards victory. So they express support for the struggles of the peasant masses when they see that they are successful in fighting for their basic rights through agrarian revolution, and these successes are defended by the New People's Army. And this is recognized and appreciated even by the urban petty bourgeoisie. So, in this way, we are establishing uh, the united front in our work as we organize, arouse, organize, and mobilize the peasant masses, as well as the uh, workers. We draw in the urban petty bourgeois, and we also draw in the other friends of the revolution, so that um, we are uh, able to bring complete and realize the aspirations of our people. In this way, um, the revolution proceeds and is advanced in all areas in an all around way. So in that sense, it is a national democratic revolution of a new type. Why is our revolution protracted, and why is it mainly fought in the countrysides? Of course, although there are many peasant um, uh, communities also near the cities and in most populated areas in the lowlands, the richest areas where we can wage our people's war, and where the reach of the enemy is weakest is still in the countrysides. So, areas of maneuver for our new people's army is best fought in the countrysides. And so, our organized forces are encouraged to and assigned to work in the countrysides rather than remain working in the big cities, so that we can um, help in building our people's army, building our armed struggle in the countrysides where there is a wide area of maneuver. And while we are still um, uh, small and weak compared to the enemy, which has big and strong forces, um, at least in the countryside, we have the wide areas where we can preserve our forces. At the same time, we exhaust the enemy by letting him drawing him in to the territories where the balance of forces are in our favor tactically. So it is important and for comrades to have mastery of the terrain and of the social and political situation of the communities in which um, they are maneuvering, or in which they are in. In Mindanao, there is the um, mountain ranges divide the different provinces and divide the different regions. And there are regional guerrilla units and regional party units that already covers major parts of these mountain ranges in Mindanao. Currently, there are 5 regions in Mindanao that have centers of gravity, that have regular guerrilla units um, of company sizes. And in front units, they have at least um, a platoon or a company sized front units also, so that the Red Army has grown in strength in the past few years because of the correct leadership of the party and the correct handling of the contradictions and the correct handling of um, issues that arise, of the strategies and tactics that the party has been um, applying in the situation or in the concrete conditions in Minda. So, um, one of the critical characteristics or particularity in Mindanao is that in all these mountain ranges, there are indigenous peoples and the Lumad. And these communities are very critical in the growth of our People's Army and in the advance of our People's War. Uh, the study of the party, of the dynamics of the Lumad people, and how they can be drawn into the revolution through agrarian revolution and defense of their territories and their land is also a critical part of us gaining our revolutionary strength in Mindanao. All of these mountain ranges, except for a few that traverses through the Moro areas in central Mindanao, has already been connected um, through mountain passes and trails so that there can be interregional and interfront cooperation in tactical maneuvers among fronts within the region and interregional, so between regions. So this is a very big achievement in the past few years that our People's Army has been able to create these highways through the mountain, if you will, where personnel as well as supply lines, as well as um, weapons and artillery can be um, uh, where these materials or these personnel can pass through so that they are not vulnerable anymore and they do not have to pass through the main highways anymore as they assist each other in the course of our People's War. So um, the work of our People's Army, especially among the indigenous peoples, the national minorities, that the communities that populate these mountains is very critical and very crucial in the advance of our People's War. Not only are they the source of, um, not only are they the wellspring of uh, cadres in the new People's Army, but it is also through the support of um, the indigenous peoples communities that we are able to advance our People's War. They provide guerrilla bases and guerrilla zones. They provide us with, um, they protect us. They provide us with intelligence information. And they also have the mastery of the terrain that allows us to learn from them and maximize the advantages that the mountainous terrains in Mindanao are able to give us in the conduct of our People's War. So, um, in the whole, the expansion of our people's movement in and our uh, of our people's war in Mindanao has been um, slow, and yet it has also advanced um, in such a way that we are able to respond to the call to complete the requisites for the advancement of our people's war from the advanced stage of strategic defensive to strategic stalemate. However, with the uneven development of the revolution within the archipelago, and also with the development or with the um, intensified reaction of the enemy against the strides that the revolutionary uh, war in Mindanao has been um, achieving, it has resulted in an unequal development of uh, of revolutionary forces in some parts of the island. However, uh, that does not stop us from um, intensifying and assisting other regions so that they could achieve the same level of armed strength and revolutionary strength in the region by deploying um, party cadres and red fighters in their areas. So there is a cooperation among regions so that party cadres as well as red fighters are able to assist other regions so that they too may advance, and so that there would be a relative um, advancement, an all-around advancement in all the regions in the island. This would help in um, uh, in the effort, no, to um, uh, win over more peasants, more workers, more petty bourgeois in the um, urban areas into the revolution, and so that they would see that the revolutionary war that we are waging is just. No? Um, so um, um, as I have said, Mindanao has a particularity for having a significant population of indigenous peoples, wherein out of the 14 to 17 million indigenous peoples in the entire Philippines, 61% are in Mindanao. And because they live in the hinterlands, in the vast expanse of mountain ranges, this is the rich ground for the growth and advance of the revolution. In these areas, we have our base, guerrilla bases and guerrilla zones, in which our red fighters and our revolutionary forces are able to stage tactical offensives that are sure to win victory against the enemy incursions in these areas. So aside from the Lumad population, there is also the particularity of the Muslim liberation movements in Mindanao that also helps to draw enemy forces in some areas of the island, so that um, fascist uh, strength and fascist reaction um, can be uh, less in other areas. No? They are drawn into those areas where there are small pockets of Muslim armed groups, and where they continue to operate. Um, so when we in the past 5 years, as I have said, in Mindanao there is a call to complete the requisites for the advance of the revolution from the advanced stage of strategic defensive to strategic stalemate. However, these efforts continue uh, to now, and we continue to exhort and to um, harness the revolutionary strength of our people's army, as well as our peasant masses and our peasant bases, and to draw in through the leadership of the proletariat, our workers, um, to so that our uh, our people's war would advance to victory.
Thank you so much, Cielo, for sharing with us your on-the-ground experience of how the People's War is being carried out in Mindanao, the particularities of the struggle on that island, and how the text has informed the advancement of the NPA in that. Our next part of the program is actually a cultural performance by Gabriela USA, which is the first overseas chapter of the Philippine-based organization Gabriela, extending the Filipino women's mass movement to the United States. Gabriela stands for General Assembly Binding Women for Reforms, Integrity, Education, Leadership, and Action, and takes its name from Gabriela Silang, the first Filipino woman to lead a revolt against the Spanish colonization of the Philippines.
Hi, my name is Abby, and I'm the Secretary General of Gabriela USA.
And my name is Hannah. I'm the Vice Chairperson of Gabriela Santa Cruz.
And we'll be singing a cultural for you all called Pagkatapos ng Digma. Paglaho ng usok sa larangang digma, lilitaw muli ang damo. At tatangayin ng hanging sariwa, amoy ng pulbura at abo. Pagkatapos ng digma ay payapa, pagtigil ng gulo at mga labanan, sugatan ay aalagaan. At ang mga bayani ay pararanglan, Pinas lang ating tatandaan. Pagkatapos ng digma ay paghilom, at mga manlulupig ay uusigin, ang bawat krimen nila'y lilitisin, kundi sa pagkagahaman nila, tayo'y di nangailangan mag-alsa. Pagkatapos ng digma ay hustisya, ang mga magsintay muling makikita, mag-anak muling magsasama. At mula sa abo tayo'y magpapanday ng sariwa at bagong buhay. Pagkatapos ng digma ay ligaya, ang tigang na lupa muling bubungkalin, at ang anilaan sa atin, at mga pabrika'y muling paaandarin, tikang yaman ay ating angkin. Pagkatapos ng digma ay sagana, at mga manlulupig ay uusigin, ang bawat krimen nila'y lilitisin, kundi sa pagkagahaman nila, tayo'y di nangailangan mag-alsa. At kung ang bayan ay muli lubigin, at laya natin ay tangkang agawin, hindi na muli paalila, takot sa sandat ay di manghihina. Sa digma ay sisilangan payapa.
Thank you to our comrades from Gab USA for that cultural performance, which is also an apt contribution as we are reaching the end of Women's History Month. Now we go on to our next reactor. We are very grateful to have a recorded message from Andy Tran. Andy is a software engineer based in Montreal, Quebec. They are a member of the Center for Philippine Concerns, which celebrates its 40th founding anniversary this year. And Andy is also the national representative of the Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle Canada chapter. You can follow them online on social media to keep up with all of the things they are doing.
Thank you, Leah, for your introduction. As the Kasama stated, my name is Andy. I'm a young Vietnamese technology worker based in Montreal, Quebec. I am so excited to share my reactions to Jose Maria Sison's Specific Characteristics of Our People's War, because this text holds some personal meaning to me. I recognize the significance of propagating specific characteristics on this day, March 29, 2023, which is the 54th anniversary of the launching of the protracted People's War in the Philippines, with the founding of the New People's Army on March 29, 1969. And I recognize the continuing importance of studying Ka Joma's writing in this year following his death last December as part of the Ka Joma Lives campaign to study his life and works in order to popularize the Philippine Revolution as a whole. My approach to this reaction to Ka Joma's specific characteristics will be from three perspectives that I've already mentioned: as a scientist and tech worker, as a Vietnamese person born and raised in Canada, and as a young person and revolutionary. In university, I studied physics. As students of mathematics and science, we're taught methods of inquiry that demand from us a combined study. On one hand, study of the concrete findings of other scientists, and on the other hand, our own practical experimentation in the laboratory. Then, when I left school, I went on to find work as a software developer. Here, in the world of technology, a similar demand is put in front of us, to combine our study of others' technical design and implementation with the specific technical or social problems we're creating software to solve. This scientific spirit of combining the general with the particular and of combining theory with practice is at the heart of the introduction to specific characteristics. Ka Joma insists that we must learn from the history of struggle, which contains lessons paid for in blood. These lessons can't just be taken abstractly as rules or laws. This would be dogmatism. And they also can't be thrown away completely, ignored and forgotten about, to start over blindly anytime we desire. This would be empiricism. The only correct choice is to study the history of class struggles and integrate those lessons with concrete practice. The concrete practice in front of Ka Joma was the Philippine Revolution, and that's why it was so necessary to note the specific characteristics of the People's War in the Philippines. He was required by his philosophical and political stance, Marxism-Leninism, to specify the actual concrete conditions and practical political problems at hand, in order to combat a dogmatic approach of other forms of revolution, or an empiricist ignorance of any history of revolution, inside or outside the Philippines. This attitude takes the method of science, as I've experienced it in university and in my workplace, and turns it on its head. Yes, it retains the necessity of interpreting the world and using that to inform our practice. But when we combine our study of revolutionary history with the practice of revolutionary organizing, it's not in order to earn a good grade or make the best app. It's not to serve capital. The science of revolution is used to liberate peoples and liberate classes. It's to control and defeat capital, not just for the benefit of one, but for the benefit of all. So as a scientist and technology worker, the method of Ka Joma's specific characteristics speaks deeply to me. But as a Vietnamese person and a revolutionary, its standpoint for liberation was even more inspiring. The second way in which specific characteristics speaks to me is as a Vietnamese person of Chinese ancestry. Reading specific characteristics actually helped me understand the Vietnamese Revolution a lot. It helped me find a softer landing when I studied the writing of General Vo Nguyen Giap, who led the People's Army of Vietnam to victory. There are similarities and differences between the Vietnamese, Chinese, and Philippine revolutions, and an inseparable link of struggle against the same US imperialist power. The Vietnamese people also fought a national democratic revolution against the French imperialism, which colonized Vietnam for over 80 years. The Vietnamese People's War was also a long process of winning many small victories in the countryside, uniting together into a solid fortress to slowly encircle bigger cities. but instead of the mountainous archipelago of the Philippines, and unlike some of China's wide plains, Vietnam is a narrow edge of a peninsula. And Vietnam was oppressed by direct colonial rule under France, compared to the Philippine situation today of indirect semi-colonial rule under one main imperialist power, the US, or the Chinese situation of indirect semi-colonial rule through a split enemy camp of warlords backed by different imperialists. Obviously, many differences exist in the terrain, geography, economics, politics, and cultures of Vietnam, China, and the Philippines. What is fundamentally and essentially the same between the Vietnamese National Democratic Revolution and the ongoing Philippine National Democratic Revolution is the absolute reliance on the broad masses of the people. General Yap had much to say on this topic. When asked, why were the Vietnamese people able to win? He responded, the Vietnamese people won because their war of liberation was a people's war. He said that our resistance war was a people's war because its political aims were to smash the imperialist yoke in order to win back national independence, and to overthrow the landlord class, the feudal landlord class, in order to bring land to the peasants. He told of how, through their propaganda, organizing, and mobilizing work among the peasant masses, they were able to help a duality of power arise in the Vietnamese countryside. He said that there existed whole villages, whole cantons, whole districts in the mountain region, where every person was a member of an organization for national salvation. And later he said, in our country, people's wars developed according to the general laws of all revolutionary wars, and also to the specific laws of the Vietnamese society and theater of operations. Hence, it is a revolutionary war waged by a whole people on all planes, a revolutionary war fought by a small nation in a narrow and thinly populated country, having an underdeveloped economy, relying on the strength of an entire people united in the struggle. With the People's War, the people will finally beat an enemy originally many times stronger. I've never been to Vietnam. I was born and raised here in Canada. I understand my language, but I don't speak it. My family is closed off from Vietnam, having left in fear and disgust at the Vietnamese Revolution because of their experiences as petty bourgeois in the South. But over a long period of time, I was able to overcome the subjectivity of my upbringing regarding the Vietnamese Revolution. With some help, I was able to learn from my history and make these connections. Because of the work of revolutionaries like Ka Joma and writings like Specific Characteristics, I was able to adopt the scientific and revolutionary viewpoint of history and understand the most important truth, that it can only be the majority, the broad masses of the people, who make change. So Ka Joma's specific characteristics helped me to resolve the contradictions of growing up as a diasporic Vietnamese, disconnected from the revolutionary struggles of my people. The final way in which specific characteristics has influenced me is as a young person and revolutionary. To me, these two things are inseparable. I believe in revolution, the fundamental upheaval of society in all aspects, as the process of one class taking political power from another class. I believe that revolution is necessary, because I believe that an unstoppable contradiction exists today between those who own and control the means of producing the necessities of life and those who work and produce and depend on those necessities. Because I'm a young person, I'm able to look forward with optimism and determination to work for the rest of my life for a revolution. In this regard, specific characteristics of Our People's War influenced my life meaningfully. My first time reading it was when I was 23 years old, in late 2018, shortly after learning about the Philippine Revolution and connecting with progressive Filipino youth and workers in Canada. Specific characteristics awed me. I thought I understood it. My second time reading it was on a summer night in 2019, lying on the floor of a peasant family's small home on the island of Negros in the Philippines. I was there for an exposure trip, my opportunity to observe and contribute to the ongoing national democratic movement by integrating with the peasant masses myself. Even though I had read and studied about the peasant movement, even though I thought I understood the peasants' demand for land and liberation, all of the study and all of the talk washed away when I was there for myself in the Philippine countryside. My mind was on fire. There I was in Negros, a young revolutionary seeing revolution before my eyes for the first time. In that moment, specific characteristics, in its clarity of analysis, helped me ground myself. It stood as a voice of comfort, but not complacency. The People's War, the revolution, they're real. But understanding them was not enough. I had to be part of it. This is the legacy that Ka Joma and his works, like specific characteristics of Our People's War, Philippine Society and Revolution, stand for socialism against modern revisionism, basic principles of Marxism-Leninism, and many others. His legacy lives on in the Communist Party of the Philippines, the National Democratic Front of the Philippines, and the New People's Army. His legacy lives in me, and in Jayan, who will be speaking after me, and every person around us. His legacy can be found in the living, breathing Philippine Revolution.
Thank you so much, Andy, for that moving reaction to the text, your comparisons to the revolution waged by the Vietnamese people, and also your personal relationship with the words of Ka Joma. We are very grateful to have this insight into how People's War has been particularized in other struggles around the world, and also the very personal and deep connection that people have had with Joma's words throughout the years and his impact on the youth. The next reactor that we have is Gian Miranda, the national chairperson of Anak Bayan Philippines, a national democratic organization with chapters all over the world.
Good day, everyone. I am Gian Miranda, the national chairperson of Anak Bayan, the most comprehensive national democratic organization of the Filipino youth. I would like to thank you for inviting me to react in the discussion about the specific characteristics of our people's war. Not new to me, nor to Anak Bayan, that a guerrilla army, the New People's Army, is present in the Philippines. We know that its primary course is to win the new democratic revolution towards a socialist society and further on, a communist world. We also know that it is led and guided by the Communist Party of the Philippines. We know that it aims to champion the struggles of the masses, primarily the plight of the peasants for genuine agrarian reform. We acknowledge the principles behind the New People's Army. The youth are not mindless nor blind to the realities of why people are driven to join the NPA, even though the reactionary state deems us as ignorant or easy to brainwash. We do not shame nor terror tag those who see that joining the armed revolution is the way towards the end of the struggles of the Filipino people, to end imperialism, bureaucrat capitalism, and feudalism, which are the three roots of poverty. Therefore, it is also these three that drive people to join the armed revolution. Second, we would like to acknowledge that this document, based on real-life social investigation and class analysis and practice, is a great example for the youth on how to learn and use Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. I would like to highlight two things. First is the new democratic revolution, which was done through the studying of the errors made before, which led to the laying out of the correct characteristics of the revolution that will lead the people to victory. One such rectification is the correct analysis of the semi-colonial, semi-feudal society. That leads us to the second point, the protracted People's War, where the war starts in the countryside and comes down to the cities. It took into account the important characteristics of the archipelago and even the population, because the majority of our population consists of the peasants, which ensures that the strategy is not just based on emotions such as rage, but on reality, meaning that the strategy will lead those who study it to victory, study and practice it to victory. Third is about rectification. This document was a product of rectification. It was authored by Amado Guerrero, but it is not only him that contributed to this. This document is a product of decades of theory and practice, of people rectifying their errors again and again to lead the masses towards the victory of the revolution. It is about changing. It is about struggling. It is about painstaking AOM work, not to prove the correctness of the principles, but to correct the principles that were wrong and strengthen the advanced practices. Lastly, I would like to say that this document can be used to battle disinformation. Historical distortion is rampant in the Philippines. Mass media and even the education system is used to spread false information to make people ignorant of the reality. This document contains information made through research, scientific analysis, investigation. It should be read by the people to be knowledgeable of the reality of the People's War. That is real, it is happening, using these strategies and for these reasons. Everything in this document, meaning all of the principles behind it and the actions that took place to obtain this knowledge, was made through tedious and extensive or exhaustive study. By study, I mean studying MLM, social investigation, and class analysis, planning, assessment, and so on and so forth. And through this method, two things have been proven by this document: that MLM is a universal guide, and second, that the principles written in this document are true and just in pursuing the National Democratic Revolution. This document should be read by the youth, everyone, those who subscribe to the principle of the armed revolution and those who do not believe in it. Why? Because it raises so many issues and ideas regarding the country and the realities within it. But I encourage the youth who want to see change, real change, to read this to further understand the many different ways that the Filipinos can act to change society towards a society that is truly free and just. Personally, I believe that what is discussed in the document, is the highest form of struggle that one can do for our country, as it does not only need time, it also needs sacrifice and selflessness.
The People's War, been raging in the countryside since '69. Celebrate the anniv every time it hits March 29. One more year, more victories across the Philippines. Did another raid on another military armory. We got AKs, M16s, plus M203s. Always serve the people, only point them at the enemy. Who that be? US troops, AFP, PNP. Till we free and we achieve real national democracy. But we can't stop there, get up out your chair, cause we got that long-term vision. Meet the people's needs, gotta end all greed, so we need that socialism. Organize every village with it, from the bottom up we flip the system. With the truth they can't keep hidden, new people fulfill the mission.
New people coming through, you better move when we come. Watch, cause here we come, new people. New people coming through, you better move when we come. Watch, cause here we come, new people. We be that new people that. We be that new people that. We be that new people that. New people that. New people.
We ain't just fighting, we organize the farmers to take back the land so the landlords can steal the harvest. Straight up and honest, that's the way we learn our lessons. MLM in practice be how we steady progressing. Educate the masses, special courses in the PSR. 3 basic problems, the solution is the PDR. People's Democratic Revolution is a people's war. Protracted, only winning when we win that mass support. It's a great upsurge, got a 5-year plan, gotta step it up a stage. Organize the people nationwide, mobilize the people's rage. Still gotta complete the rev, the Gati Puna started. We need new people for the new people's army.
Coming through, you better move when we come. Watch, cause here we come, new people. New people coming through, you better move when we come. Watch, cause here we come, new people. We be that new people that. We be that new people that. We be that new people that. New people that. New people.
We especially challenge the youth to join the new People's Army. Without the People's Army, the people have nothing against the intensifying exploitation and oppression of the ruling class. Only through the strong support of the broad masses of the people will the NPA succeed in its central task to smash the reactionary state apparatus and build a truly democratic people's government.
Thank you so much to comrades in the US for that cultural performance. It was a great reminder of how the New People's Army is not just a military arm, but that they also conduct ideological, political, and organizational work in service to the people. In the beginning, if you attended a little bit earlier, you would have seen the videos that we played about the New People's Army and agricultural revolution, and also organs of political power.
Itong tatlong sangkap na ito para tayong nagluluto ng isang ulam o nagluluto ng isang pagkain. Kung kulang o hindi sapat yung amount ng mga sangkap na
Tagas-gatusan ka mga mabubusan. Atong kanong na ginapas, kaya kung tanaw na ito, kung dirita, ba't natatong mo na?
The revolutionary movement continues to build the People's Army and the peasant movement, solve the problem of landlessness of the peasantry, and build the people's democratic power, even while the reactionary state power is still entrenched in the cities. The revolutionary movement's struggle to abolish feudalism and solve landlessness is in response to the demand of the peasant majority of the Filipino people for a genuine agrarian revolution. In general, the revolutionary movement through the New People's Army works together with the peasantry and their revolutionary mass organizations and discusses and plans with them on how to go about reducing land rent, lowering interest rates on loans, raising farm workers' wages, raising prices of farm products, eradicating usury, and so on. This is enforced by advancing mass campaigns and mass actions. In areas controlled by the revolutionary movement, where the village and municipal revolutionary committees are firmly established, lands, which are often public lands or forestall lands, are distributed for free. At the same time, there is active campaigning for the collectivization of agriculture through simple labor exchange or mutual aid in communal farming. The peasantry is also encouraged to rely on their own strength and unity when fighting for their own interests. But they know that the People's Army is behind them to support and protect them in their fight for land. Today, the anti-feudal mass struggle is surging in many towns and provinces and gaining victories.
Karang mahuman dire sa mga gimbuhaton, baling na pud sa pikas mga area para sa pagtabang sa mga masa.
The deepest links with the masses are presented as the firm foundation for organizing the various mass organizations. Their enthusiastic participation in developing the revolutionary mass organizations is a key factor in building the organs of political power with the ever-present assistance of the people's fighters. We can see the deep integration of the revolutionary forces with the masses through nutrition and health programs, through educational and cultural programs, recreation, etc. The various revolutionary organizations of workers, peasants, women, youth, children, indigenous peoples, and other sectors are the foundation of the organs of political power. In the many thousands of villages, the revolutionary forces build the organs of political power. They hold elections to form their revolutionary committees with subcommittees for education, organization, health, land reform, culture, settling of disputes, environmental protection, and security. With the agrarian revolution, the armed struggle, and the mass-based building, the organs of political power are built with the leadership of the Proletarian Party and the participation of the People's Army. These organs of political power in many thousands of villages and some towns constitute the ever-growing People's Democratic Government.
We also had our opening speaker, Ka Joma, who talked about the 7 sections of the text, specific characteristics of our people's war, and also the importance of that text continued importance of that text to our struggle in the Philippines. The need and requirement for us to take these lessons, take these political ideologies, these theories, but to particularize them for our specific context. And it's important for us also to note the echoing of history and continued relevance that we have, especially in regards to Marcos's return to power through Bongbong Marcos. And you'll see in her speech that she did reference that the Marcos-US relationship and the Philippine puppet presidencies as being a particular challenge for us in our struggle against US imperialism. This also really has relevance for us today as we see a Marcos in power again, and also as she referenced in her speech, additional constitutional challenges through charter change and constitutional convention that we're seeing in the Philippines. It also speaks to the need for international support, the continued need for international solidarity, and for all of us in the diaspora and for our allies and friends, a need to really connect to our struggles, to connect our struggles to the struggles of the proletariat around the world, and to work together in our joint fight. The next part of the program was a reaction from Cielo Rojas about on-the-ground advancements of the New People's Army in Mindanao and the justness of revolutionary war. So in that case, it was really useful for us to get an actual sense, one particular example of how specific contexts and conditions really inform the way that people's war is carried out in different areas, with the particularity of, in that area, specifically, something that she mentioned a lot was the composition of many indigenous peoples and also Muslim liberation movements. The next reactor that we had was Andy from Friends of the Filipino People in Struggle, a very moving tribute that talked about not only their relationship to the text as a Vietnamese person and that text in relation to the Vietnamese people's struggle, but also in terms of their own personal ideological development and growth, and their closeness to the Philippine movement, which was very moving and is a good reminder for all of us that, like, while this is a struggle that we're all taking on collectively, a lot of times we do come to it from these like very personal, like emotional and interpersonal connections, which is very nice. There was also a nice focus on youth, which I think you will note from this program and also our previous book launch on February 4th, is that a lot of our program components, not just in front of the camera, but also behind the scenes and with all of our contributions, are driven by youth. They're contributed by youth, and that really speaks to the way that this movement is like growing and carrying on and continuing to thrive through the youth of today, through future generations, but also learning a lot from the lessons of the past and learning a lot from everybody who came before us. That connects to the next two pieces of our program, which was the cultural performance by Young Ro and also Jay-Ann's reaction, which was a really good example also of noting that we in this movement continue to learn and analyze and rectify. And I think that is one of the strengths that we carry with us onwards towards victory. We do have special thanks to our opening speaker, Ka Joma, the reactors, Cielo, Andy, and Jeanne, the comrades from the US and Canada who contributed cultural performances, everyone working hard behind the scenes for tech, and of course to today's organizers, the National Democratic Front from the Philippines International Information Office. There are some announcements. Please keep these in mind, but also please follow us on social media so that you get updates about these events that are coming up. We do have more educational discussions that are part of the Ka Joma Live study movement. Before we end, we will have a cultural performance from comrades in Canada doing an accordion rendition of Awit ng Tagumpay, or Victory Song. As the song says, when we stand united, we will achieve revolutionary victory in freeing the Philippines from imperialist domination. Thank you again to everyone who has joined us today. We will be sending out this recording with everything that has happened and all of the links. So don't worry if you haven't had a chance to take everything from the chat. And let us carry forward Ka Joma's teachings to inspire and inform our struggle for national democracy and liberation in the Philippines. Ka Joma lives.
Ka Joma lives.
Maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. Thank you everyone and enjoy this closing cultural performance.
Bangon bayan, tayo'y magwawagi, abot tanaw, ang bagong araw, puso diwa, ng bayang dinusta, sumisigaw, hustisya at paglaya ng bayang api, walang katarungan, daan taong, hawak ng dayuhan, sulong bayan, tayo'y magwawagi, ating yaman, laging ipaglaban, lupa, langit, dagat, kabundukan, nasa kamay ng mga dayuhang mapang-apiganit, mapagsamantala, kapit-bisig, hindi malulupig, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayo'y lalaban, ubod lakas ang tinig, isisigaw ang sulong, tibayan ang hanay, gapiin ang kaaway, tibayan ang hanay, gapiin ang kaaway, sulong bayan, tayo'y magwawagi, Ipaglaban ating karapatan, hilaga, timog, silangan, kanluran, bawat sulok ng bayay nagkakaisang tunay. Ang buong kapuluan, kapit bisig, hindi malulupig, pangon, sulong, bayay magwawagi. Sabay-sabay, sigaw ng tagumpay, lungsod, baryo, eskwela at pabrika, ihuhudyat, sigaw ng kalayaan ng bayang may apoy, sa diwa at tibdib, kapit bisig, hindi malulupig, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayon lalaban, ubod lakas ang tinig, isisigaw ang sulong, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayon lalaban, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayon lalaban, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayon lalaban, sumulong kabayan, tayo ngayon lalaban. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated. The people united will never be defeated.